Good morning. I'm so excited to share my presentation with you, A Doula for Everyone, How Doulas Reduce Trauma. We'll talk a little bit about me and why this is an important topic to me, what a doula actually is, how doulas help to improve outcomes, consent, and practical skills, and you'll get a list of resources as well. My name's Brooke, and I've been a birth worker since 2006 and a certified professional midwife since 2020. I've spent the majority of my doula career working in birth centers, hospitals, and in home births. I was a doula exclusively for 14 years, and then I spent a couple of years doing both doula work as well as midwifery. I have 5 children. 4 of them were born at home, and 3 were in such a hurry they got there before the midwife did. I'm really passionate about creating options for twins and breeches. I love to do twin births. I love to do breech births. But I also like, more importantly, to provide options for these people. I feel it's very important. I love beaches. I love coffee. I love wine. If you can put me on a beach with a cup of coffee in the morning and a glass of wine in the evening, that's my happy spot. I am very enthusiastic about educating families and teaching them. I want them to know what their options are and the reason that certain things are done or not done, and then find out what is important to them. Some fun facts about me. I actually worked at Australia Zoo with Steve Irwin when I was younger. You can see a picture there on the slideshow. I love food. I love to try new foods. I love to try new restaurants. I always take my birth team out to eat after we have a birth, if it's a time of day when something's open, and even in the middle of the night, if we can find something open, and try a lot of new options. So what is a doula? Doulas can actually be a variety of different things. Some people will refer to a doula when they are speaking of a friend or family member who is providing support. Sometimes a doula is actually a professional who has received either educational training or an apprenticeship of some variety, or maybe has just learned on the job themselves by being put in the situation multiple times. If we are talking about the technical definition of a doula, it is what we see here. A doula is a professional who provides physical, emotional, and information support before, during, and shortly after childbirth to help parents achieve the most satisfying experience possible. Doulas come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Some doulas prefer to work exclusively in hospitals. Some doulas like to work outside of hospitals. In India, I know that's a little bit different. You have a variety of different types of hospitals and birth homes. In the States, we have a little more variety, and I don't know that that's necessarily better, but it is a little bit different. So a question that we get asked a lot is, if you have a midwife, do you really need a doula? Particularly when we are speaking about privately hired midwives and some of the midwife birth homes and things like that. So you can see here that while midwives and doulas do have some overlapping qualities, they are in fact very distinct and different professions. So the things they have in common: both certainly care for mothers and babies, both provide education and information, and both recognize the importance of building a relationship with the mother, hopefully. Midwives and doctors, this applies to both, typically are only involved during the labor process, later in the process, and their role should be more of a guardian of the space, making sure everything is staying on track and that the clinical side of things are taken care of, writing prescriptions if those are needed, administering medication if those are needed, and things of that nature. Many of the midwives and doctors work exclusively in hospitals and birth homes in the States, hospitals and birth centers. There are some certainly who work in an out-of-hospital setting, especially midwives in the States. We have a lot of midwives that work in out-of-hospital settings, home birth and birth centers. The care provider, the practitioner, also offers alternative therapies and treatment options, and often works for another entity. Like they may work for a OBGYN practice, or they may work for a specific hospital. Doulas, on the other hand, are hired specifically by the client. Doulas typically come much earlier in labor, and they provide physical, emotional, and educational support to the clients. Doulas do not provide clinical care. Doulas can work in any location where the family chooses to receive care. So again, that can transfer from laboring with the people in their homes to going into hospitals or birthing homes, or depending on the area, even home births if they are working in the States or other areas where home birth is a legal option. They provide support as well as practical help. Sometimes doulas will make meals or ensure that mom and her partner are eating well during labor, make sure that they have the things ready to go to the hospital and things of that nature. They tend to be a lot more hands-on and focus very much on the mother's physical, emotional, and mental comfort. And again, doulas should work for the client, meaning that's where their loyalty lies and that's where their focus is. So the benefits of having a doula. Doulas have been studied for an extended period of time now, and it has been shown very conclusively that having a doula provides many benefits to the mother and some even to the baby. Some of the studies suggest that women are 51% less likely to have a C-section with doula support. A lot of this probably has to do with them staying at home longer and coming into the birthing location much later. They are more likely to reach their breastfeeding goals. They are less likely to need analgesia, epidurals, nitrous oxide, other ways of relieving pain medically. They are less likely to need oxytocin in the States, syntocin in India. Naturally occurring, it is called Pitocin, and that is used to drive the contractions of labor. So having a doula actually decreases the need for Pitocin. It is less likely that mothers who have a doula will experience postpartum mood disorders. They are less likely to have a forceps delivery, and they have shorter labors than women who have no additional support. Some suggest by an average of 98 minutes. Doulas provide a professional cheerleader, if you will. So not only are they giving you practical tips, and we'll talk about some of those later, doulas are making good suggestions. You've been doing this for a while. Why don't we do this? Or this seems to be happening. Perhaps this would be a good position. Doulas are also making sure that the mothers are hydrating. It's very important during labor that mothers are hydrating. They're making sure that they're snacking, that they've eaten meals in early labor so that they have the energy to labor efficiently and effectively. But more than that, they are just there to say, you've got this. You are doing a great job. You're doing it, mama. This is what's supposed to happen. You're doing all the right things, and giving that word of encouragement. And sometimes just having that extra person there who is cheering you on gives you the extra momentum and drive to be able to successfully complete any task, whether that be labor or breastfeeding or doing the dishes in my case. It's not a job that I really enjoy doing. According to ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, they say that currently about 40% of women who give birth in a U.S. hospital have no postpartum care once they leave. The remaining 60% are likely to be offered just one office visit with their OB around 6 weeks after birth. In my conversations, it appears that India has very similar systems set up. The postpartum period is a time of rapid physical, emotional, and familial adjustment, and it's well known that many cultures have lost the art of honoring this time of adjustment, the U.S. being one of the worst in my personal opinion. A postpartum doula can fill this gap. Postpartum doulas, while some people will work as labor doulas and postpartum doulas, there are women who strictly do postpartum care. Postpartum doulas are able to be there to be that extra set of hands and support for mothers postpartum. Mothers who are able to utilize postpartum doula support are more likely to breastfeed and to exclusively breastfeed for longer and reach breastfeeding goals they set for themselves. They are also less likely than those without postpartum support to experience postpartum depression and other postpartum mood disorders. Postpartum moms need a lot of physical and emotional support. And it's very important when supporting moms postpartum that we take care of the mother so the mother can take care of the baby. Our job should not be to come in and take the baby and do for the baby while the mother fends for herself. They are a unit, And just because the baby is now outside the mother does not make them less of a unit. So keeping that unit intact and then supporting the mother, keeping her warm, keeping her hydrated, keeping her fed. And again, just encouraging her. You're doing a great job, mama. You know what your baby needs. You're such a good mother. And other ways of encouraging her and taking care of other children in the home so that she can rest and recover all goes a long way in helping to prevent postpartum mood disorders and to facilitate much more rapid healing and recovery. So, who makes up the birth team? Well, certainly the mother and the baby are the center of that team, and they are the stars of the show. I love this image. This was actually one of my clients, and everyone who's there is not even in this picture. But I'm over here. There's a student midwife here, her husband here. There was actually another midwife that was also there and a friend of hers. And we all had a job to do. We were all busy supporting this mama, rubbing her head, holding her hand, giving her words of encouragement, giving her sips of water, giving her bites of food, just being there to care for her so that she could do the hard work that she had to do. So as I just said, the birth team can be very large. It can also be very small, depending on the mother's needs and obviously the location where she is and access to resources. Often the birth team will have a midwife or an obstetrician or a family doctor or some other medical provider. And again, they're in charge of the clinical care. You may have childbirth educators that have been a participant in the care for this mother. Massage therapists and bodywork experts can really help during the pregnancy and postpartum. Chiropractic care, keeping all the bony structures centered and lined up. Birthing assistants, nurses, sometimes mental health professionals. Some people are already in care, and sometimes pregnancy is a very big strain on mothers or relationships and things of that nature. Loved ones, close family, close friends, those people may be involved, whether it's in the birth room itself, out taking care of other children in the home, preparing food for the team that is in the room. Again, doulas, very important role, and hopefully they are going to be involved in the birth team. Lactation support specialists may be needed depending on the mother and her body anatomy and her needs and her history. Pelvic floor therapy, that's another area, especially moms who have given birth previously or maybe have had any type of pelvic trauma. And it's very important that everyone on the team recognizes the benefit of everyone else on the team. The only people on this team that are more important than anyone else are the mother, the baby, and the mother's partner. That nucleus, and even more than the partner, the mother and the baby, they are the center of the team. They are the largest personality. They are the important role. And all the rest of us are just supporting casting characters. And our desire should all collectively be to help each other be the best that we can be, to support the safety and well-being and empowerment of this mother-baby unit. So where is the disconnect? Where do we start kind of falling through the cracks? Well, providers, doctors, midwives, sometimes can really lack the awareness of the unique role that doulas play and how they can benefit mothers and babies. Sometimes doctors and midwives lack the awareness of the benefit that doulas offer the family as a whole, just keeping dad from being concerned about certain things, reassuring mothers or mother-in-laws that everything is going exactly fine, explaining to other children what mom is doing is very normal and how hard she's working and what a great job she's doing. Sometimes it's because we lack awareness of the benefit that doulas offer ourselves as the practitioners. We can really lean into doulas who are knowledgeable and skilled and have a good relationship with their client, and they can actually really make our jobs easier as practitioners. And sometimes providers really have that I can do it all attitude and feel like they can be everything their client needs and that they are kind of being superseded or usurped by having this other person filling an important emotional role for the client. On the alternate side, doulas have some areas where they fall short in working with doctors and midwives. It's not uncommon for doulas to fail to provide positive intent from the providers. Sometimes doulas, I speak very specifically for the state, often doulas fail to provide the positive intent from the provider. Sometimes they kind of come in with this attitude of, I have to protect my client from this practitioner or provider who is going to do things to my client that they do not want done. In that same vein, sometimes the doulas really miss the mark in communicating with the providers. They don't know really how to communicate or speak well to the doctors or midwives to facilitate a very smooth team effort and to really build that bridge themselves. Sometimes doulas can really overstep their roles and provide guidance to clients. I've been in situations, both as a doula and as a practitioner, where the advice was at odds. And what doulas need to remember is that if you have built a good communication and relationship with the practitioner, then there should be good feedback on why they are suggesting certain things. And then that gives the doula more ability to support that position that the provider has and offer guidance that is not contrary to it, where the mother feels like she's stuck in a conflicting situation. And sometimes doulas, just like the doctor sometimes can think they can be everything for their client, sometimes doulas can actually disrupt positive relationships between their client and the client's doctor or midwife because they want to be the person that the client is leaning on and trusting and talking to and needing for support, and they don't want to share that. We're all human and we all have human emotions, and it is important that we all do a little bit of deep dive in ourselves to see where we may try and insert ourselves as the heroine or hero in a situation and be it all for our client versus recognizing that they are the heroes of this story and we are all in support roles, and therefore we don't need to pit ourselves against other people on the birth team. So what can doctors and midwives do? We can educate ourselves about the benefits of doulas and what they actually can offer to make our jobs easier, as well as how they can help support the client. Get excited when you find out your client's having a doula. Change that mental attitude. Be excited. This is going to be great. One more person on the team, one more set of hands to make the load easier and lighter for all of us. Assume positive intent from the doula and assume they know things about the client that you yourself may not know, because in theory, they've been laboring with this client at home for a while, have probably met this client at their own home in a more socialized setting where it's more equal, the client and the doula. And so the doula may have really valuable insight for you. You can easily ask the doula for their input and seek guidance about this mom specifically. What does this mom need? How can we provide her support to make this easier for her? Does she have any traumas that we're unaware of that we can help to alleviate versus adding layers to it? And it's great as you're beginning to build these relationships between doctors, midwives, and doulas. Offer open-hearted feedback and ask for open-hearted feedback when things are going well as when they are not going well. And try to approach the feedback when things are not going well as an opportunity for each of you to learn together and share together versus I'm going to tell you what you did wrong. And it's amazing how you can quickly build relationships. When I was working as a doula and working in the hospital, I had phenomenal relationships with many of the doctors and midwives in the area, as well as the nurses that we came in contact with. So I could walk in and I could call a nurse by name. I would say, "Oh, great, I'm so glad to see you." And sometimes, even if it wasn't a nurse that I was really glad to see, the more I would say it, the more I would begin to believe that I was very excited to see this doctor or nurse, and the more they would begin to believe that they could be part of the team. And so by intentionally creative positive intent on the backside, you actually create real, true communication and positive feelings between all the people on the team. So providers can do that. When you see the doula, oh, wow, this doula's here. It's really great. This is going to make my job easier. I love when these doulas come in. Tell the doula that. And the more you do it, you may be surprised at how you actually bring that into being. So things doulas can do to build that relationship and to make things really good for moms and babies is, one, recognize how much they do to set the tone for the birth. both in the moment and in the client's memory. Doulas really are the frame for the picture. So if you have a doula that arrives at a birth and they're hectic, they're scared, they're angry about something, they already have a chip on their shoulder about the doctor you're going to be going to or the hospital where you're giving birth, they are already framing this birth in a negative light. And the labor is going to have a downhill trajectory more times than not. Again, I've been doing birth work now for nearly 18 years. October will be 18 years. And I have done birth work both as a brand new baby doula, a very well respected and very well established doula, as a very baby midwife, and as a midwife who has grown a practice and feel like I can really represent my community well. And I have seen, both from providing the service and witnessing the service, it's so clear how much doulas do to set the tone for the birth and kind of start people on the path that the birth tends to go down. Same thing with memories. As doulas, it is so important that we do not upsert mothers' memories and partners' memories with our own memories until they've had a chance to process and create their own memories. Sometimes we witness things in birth that really traumatizes us. We're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. It was such a terrible thing. And that mother never has a memory of it. She just doesn't. She was not really paying attention in that moment. She doesn't have that negative reaction to it, or the scared reaction, or whatever reaction you had. She doesn't have it. And if you come in telling her your memory and how this traumatized you, you are creating trauma for her that was never hers to carry. So as doulas, it is so important that in the early days after the birth, and when I say early days, I mean the first weeks and months, that we do not insert our memories and override her memories. So once moms have had time to process and they start asking you questions, you can answer questions. And I still encourage, answer truthfully, always truthfully with your client, whether it's good, bad, ugly. Answer just the question, don't elaborate, and then allow them to continue to unpack if there's more they want to unpack and know. And if that's all they wanted to know, again, you're not creating additional memories where they didn't need them. If it's really happy, joyful memories and it's something they just missed and you're down the road, then certainly feel free to share those things. I've definitely done that where it's like, oh my goodness, were you paying attention? But this just happened actually. I had a twin birth and the mom was sitting in front of the dad. She's holding baby in each arm and he's got his arms around her and he is just grinning ear to ear. And then we were taking photos and videos and we panned the camera towards him and he like throws up both thumbs like this and was so excited. It was so super cute. And we were able to share, those kinds of fun moments with her down the road. But again, it wasn't immediate because they really do need the time for their own memories to develop so they have that birth story that is theirs and their experience very solidly ingrained before overriding with more information. Doulas need to be really mindful when offering critical feedback about a particular provider or location, especially when the client will not or cannot secure an alternative. Again, setting that tone. If you have a client that you know is going to be walking into a facility and a provider who is not going to be very good and kind to them, you don't serve a purpose by telling them that that's what's happening. Now, giving some gentle heads ups and like, hey, let's, how are we going to make a plan that you can really focus no matter what else is going on around you? You can just kind of tune people out in the background, just let those sounds kind of wash over you and not take them in. Are you going to listen to music? Is somebody going to lay right by your head and talk to you and whisper encouraging words or mantras to you? So I'm not saying blindly let them walk in with no preparation, but encouraging them to expect negativity is not going to benefit them, particularly when there is no alternative. If you know something about a location and the client asks for information or feedback and they do have other alternatives, then certainly give them the information you have, hopefully just as facts without skewing one way or the other and allowing them to make the decision that is best and right for them. Avoid making the birth story about your perception. As we've already talked about, the client, the mother, and the baby needs to be the center of the story, and us constantly reminding them of how great we did in various moments is again putting us as the hero in the story instead of the client. Assume positive, and if not positive, at least neutral intent when providers are offering interventions that your clients doesn't want or meets clients' requests or desires with resistance. Again, building that communication, learning how to dialogue, and communicating with the provider in a way that does not build more hostility is a very important skill for doulas to attain. So, consent in birth work. Consent is essentially just permission. Permission should always be asked before we touch somebody. Always. That is across the board in life and particularly in birth. When you walk into a room, you should introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm going to be taking care of you today. As a doula, you're assuming consent is already granted because they hired you, but that doesn't let you off the hook. You should still come in, take a moment, make eye contact, and ask if it's okay for you to touch them before you begin doing any of the maneuvers and things we're going to talk about. No is a complete statement and it needs to be respected. If a client tells you no or stop at any point, they mean no and you need to stop. Your needs or wants or desires to get whatever information you're trying to get or whatever you think needs to be done does not trump your client's right to bodily autonomy. If you are doing something and they gave you consent and halfway through they say stop, consent is no longer given and stop is what they mean. The needs, desires, and beliefs of anyone else on the team are never more important than the needs, desires, and beliefs of a client patient. It's very important that we all recognize and understand that. A lot of trauma happens in birth settings because of things being done to women's body against their will. All right, so now we can talk about some practical skills that doulas can do. And these are things, yes, doctors and midwives can learn them too and put them into practice, but most often, doctors and midwives have a lot of other things that they are doing, whether that be caring for multiple people laboring at the same time or managing the clinical aspect of it. And this is great things for doulas to do. And it's great things for doulas to actually teach partners as well so that they can be hands-on participants. First and foremost, as we've talked about several times throughout this presentation, you have to make sure all basic needs are met first, okay? So is the client hydrated? Is she nourished? Is she warm? Is she comfortable? Does she feel safe? All those things are what comes first and foremost because you can do all the hip squeezes, counter pressure, and position changes that you want to do. But if a client is ultimately scared, stressed, cold, hungry, dehydrated, her body does not have the capability to labor as efficiently and as effectively and as easily as it would if those basic needs were taken care of. So hip squeezes, massage, counter pressure, cool cloths, these are all fans. Should put fans on the list. This is not an exhaustive list, by the way. It's just some of the very quick top things that you can do to give that extra bit of comfort to mom and help the labor to feel more manageable and even enjoyable. Some moms really enjoy laboring. So here's some examples. So you can have the partner and mother being in kind of that, more intimate space, and then the doula here providing counter pressure on the back. She's probably given other suggestions while this mom's in this position. She might have dad sit down and put one knee up himself so mom can prop a foot up on the dad's knee to get that asynclitic hip and then switch sides. She may just have dad sink lower so mom can lay further down on him and rest thoroughly in between contractions and then sit more upright during. So positions can be anything you want them to be to provide support and comfort for the mom. But these kinds of things just show you how even just some very gentle support without a lot of movement can still have a lot of benefit for the mother. Water tubs are not so common in India, but you could do something similar by having mom in the shower. She could sit on a birth ball or hands and knees on the shower, or even sit reclined in the shower. Let that water run over her back or her abdomen, and her doula or partner could sit there where they can still hold hands with her and provide just that very calm, very still physical touch. Moms in labor typically do not like a lot of erratic movement. There's a lot going on in their body. So firm touch, like you're going to touch a mom with her consent. If you're going to rub, you want to do long, firm strokes, not short, petty strokes. Don't know how many moms I've heard yell, "Stop petting me, I'm not a dog." So be very conscious of that. All sensations are heightened during labor, and you do want to make sure that you are providing support and comfort, not added irritation and aggravation. So hip squeezes. I'm going to show you so many pictures of hip squeezes because I just want to kind of demonstrate how you can do hip squeezes in so many different places and in so many different positions. So the pelvis, if your feet are together, the top of the pelvis is going to be more upright and open. And then the more you move your legs wide and out, the more you're going to close the top of the pelvis and open the outlet. So it is important when you're thinking about hip squeezes to think about where you are in labor. If you're in early labor, you would want to hip squeeze very low on the hips, very much at the bottom of the pelvis to really help that top part open more. During the maybe -1, 0 station, right, squeezing right in mid pelvis. So right in the center of the hips to really open that mid pelvis as much as possible. And then when you are late labor, getting close to pushing or pushing, pressing at the top of the hips to really open that outlet is very, very beneficial. So in this first picture, the mom's leaning over a bed, obviously, and this doula is really not even on the side of the hips. She's kind of more just in that center part of the hips, but up high and pressing. So I'm going to hypothesize that this baby is probably pretty low down. In this other picture, this is a stage demo photo, and they're obviously laughing quite intently. Where this doula's hands are placed in real labor, the mother would probably look more like the mom in the first picture. Head down, quiet, very focused in her own world. But it's still a really good demo of how the hip squeeze works. So here are some other pictures using your fist. See how the mom has a knee pad under, using a pillow or carpeting or something to support the knees if you have a hard floor is very helpful. But you can do it while the mom sits on the ball, while mom leans on the ball. You can do it with fist. You can do it with open hands. You can even do it with two people. So you could have one person on one side and one person on the other, and each pushes their hip straight in. And then that way it's not quite as much arm pressure and arm strength for doulas. We'll end up with really shaky arms before labor's even that far gone when you're doing a lot of hip squeezes. You can also, I'm going to go back, I forgot to say, you can also wrap, we call them rebozos, that's like a long Mexican cloth, but you can use any kind of a wrap or scarf and wrap it around the hips. And then once you wrap it, you hold both ends and pull this way. And so that squeezes the hips without you having to constantly be doing it this way. You can kind of pull this way, and it gives your arms a different muscle group to use. And you can, again, do it with two people. One person can hold it over there and one over here, and you can pull. So some mothers really enjoy doing it that way. So again, just remember, the lower on the hips, the more you open the top. Mid hip is going to open mid hip, and high up on the hips is going to open the outlet more. And you can most definitely try these yourself. Get in different positions, move your legs in different ways, have somebody squeeze your hip or squeeze somebody's hips, and see where you feel things. So some practical skills for labor progression. We're going to talk a little bit about lift and tuck to help babies engage. We're going to talk about aiding the pelvis, opening top to bottom by moving the legs, wide stance, opening the lower and legs together, opening the top. We just talked about it a little bit. We're going to see it doing more leg movements versus hip squeezes. Heels together, knees out, which opens the inlet of the pelvis. Knees together, heels out, opens the outlet of the pelvis. So let's have a look at some of these.
I had a question on the physiology of why we want knees together, internal rotation for the active or pushing phase of labor. I put stickers on my sit bones here. So for external rotation, we're opening the top of the pelvis, and internal rotation, knees together, we are opening the outlet or the bottom of the pelvis. And if I do an anterior pelvic tilt here as well, you can see it's opening up the bottom. The stickers are moving farther apart to let baby out. I had
Right? So you can see there when she was moving her pelvis, how the different movements open different areas of the pelvis. So lift and tuck. This is a great position for helping baby engage at the beginning of labor. So you can do this in a variety of ways. Here's a couple of demonstrations. You can have a partner, the doula, stand behind mom. And in a contraction, mom would actually bend her knees a little bit during a contraction and kind of sink down a little bit. And then the person behind can lift that abdomen just straight up, just gentle lift. And that helps that baby kind of slip under, just kind of slip under that pubic bone there. And then you could have dad supporting mom from behind, holding her. Doula could be in front, and the doula could just lift straight up from the front versus from behind. Mom could actually stand against the wall. So her back would be flat, again, knees bent. So her pelvis is tilted a little bit. Because again, like we're trying to drop that baby under that brim. And then the mom could lift herself, or again, someone can stand in front and lift. You can actually tie the mom's belly up a little bit, wrap that rebozo or wrap a long scarf around the mom's abdomen, up and over the back, and then she can just pull straight down on those strings, and that will lift her abdomen during a contraction. It's very important though that the back is flat, knees are slightly bent, pelvis is tilted just a little bit so that baby can slip down when you're doing the lift. Often we will say to do this for 10 contractions. Some moms find it feels really great and they want to do it for longer. That's fine. Follow mom's leads. We don't have to override her desires and things like that. But it is good to note that 10 contractions at least you probably want to do for this. Again, using the scarf or rebozo, some different ways to provide some movement for the baby. You can wrap it around the mom's abdomen and then come up from the top and kind of shimmy and shift that baby to help that baby get a little bit of wiggle and can help babies find a good position, particularly if they are in there a little asynclitic, a little wonky. You can also put the rebozo around the hips and you hold your hands very tight, like you're gonna be flush up against that hip bone, and you're gonna hold it and then you're just gonna jiggle during contractions. Usually it feels really great. Moms really like it. This first one you could do with two people. We've done it with two people and you can rock it. This one where it's around the hips is very hard to do two people because the claw's held so tightly to the hips and it's such a fast, short little jiggle that it's usually a one person thing. But both of these feel really, really great and can really help baby make those little micro movements that actually go a long way in helping babies really shift and shimmy. A couple other common positions, toilet laboring. You cannot go wrong with toilet laboring. Moms can labor where they are facing forward, like this mom is. And this doula is just providing gentle, straight massage down the mom's spine. You could also reach down and do direct counter pressure. So with counter pressure, I wish I had someone here that I could demo, but you're using the flat of your hand and you're just pressing into the mom's spine and sacrum. And opposite of the hip squeeze, you're going to move down with the baby. So higher baby is, the higher you're providing the counter pressure. And as the baby moves lower, you move lower and you go down. And so you can easily do counter pressure in this position. You would just be kind of doing it with your hand, cupping her butt versus coming up, because obviously you couldn't tilt your body in that direction. You can also have mom turn around, put a pillow on the back of the toilet, and then you could provide that counter pressure or even a hip squeeze while she's facing backwards. It also allows her to really rest thoroughly in between, take little naps, things like that. Squatting, a lot of moms really feel squatting is good, particularly late in the process. And see how her feet are flat? It is important when moms are squatting, their feet are flat. You can sit behind her and give her support. She could turn around. You could have a pillow on your lap and she could rest her head there while you still support. You could do this with two people. The dad could sit in front. He might be sitting on a ball and just holding her hand, looking in her eyes, telling her how great she is, while the doula is sitting behind and actually holding her up. Might do it vice versa. Maybe doula's tired and dad's really refreshed and strong. He holds her up, supports her weight, and the doula sits in front to brag on her and tell her how great she's doing. Inversion, which is the center picture here, that can be a really great position to do before you do any of the shimmying positions we talked about. This is a great prenatal position in labor. It's also great. Mom should not do this by themselves. For the record, you should have somebody there to help mom stand up. But you could do a variation of this called knee chest, where you put the mom's chest flat, her head flat on the bed, and then her legs are pushed up as far as they can till they hit her belly so that she's in an incline like this, either on the floor or the bed. And even in that position, you can do the little shimmy, 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 and that can really help babies shift. These lunges, see how there's a pillow under the mom's knee again. So you would do the right leg up and the left leg down and then alternate. You could do this standing up with one foot on the bed or a chair. Many variations of this. And again, you're just thinking about where is baby and how would the pelvis moving assist this baby in its rotation and descent down. Another picture of just showing how you can hold a mom up and let her labor while still putting counter pressure on her back. Again, two people could do this. Dad could be supporting mom, doula's behind providing the counter pressure. And then how wide her legs are would depend on how low the baby is. So always thinking of that as doulas. So a few more practical skills for labor progression. We are going to talk a little bit about sideline, walters, flying cowgirl, and some other ways to make more room in the pubic bone, under the pubic bone. We're going to watch another little video and you'll be able to see a little bit how these different positions make more room for baby. You see as she moves her knees in and out, how it changes. So knees out is much tighter than when she puts her knees in. Yes, and then the knees are in, there's a lot more room for that baby to come out. The sideline release, this is a modified chiropractic technique. You will notice that the moms are stacked very square, so shoulder over shoulder, hip over hip. They actually start with their legs stacked on top of each other. And then you have the mom lift the top leg straight up and drop it over the edge of the bed. You want the mom to be about fist width between the edge of the bed and her hip. You don't want her so far over that she's going to tip off. And then the support person's job is just, as you can see in this top picture really clearly, kind of keeping your hand there. Sorry if I'm covering my face when I'm demoing. You can just put your hand right there in that crease to support the hip so mom doesn't continue to roll forward. And this is going to really stretch that psoas muscle. It's going to stretch all that, the tendons and ligaments in that area. You want to hold this for 3 to 5 minutes. You definitely want to get a couple contractions in if it's during labor, but this is great prenatally as well. Fantastic. You want to lift that leg up and then stack it back. And then you have mom flip sides. What you do with one side, you do with the other. So if you're doing any of these lunges, left leg up, right leg up, left leg up on a bed, right leg up on the bed. You always want to do both. So you can just see that in all these pictures, the mom is laying very square. She's not right on the edge of the bed where she's going to tip off. She's close, but not that close. And you just let that leg hang. You do not want it touching the floor. So I took all these from the Spinning Babies website. It's a wonderful resource for doulas and for moms. I encourage people to go check it out. But this hospital one is, you can see the Walters, it's front on, but in this one you can clearly see that her feet are not touching the ground. So I wanted you to see this. Her butt's right on the edge. Her hips are hanging down. And you can imagine how that is opening very, very wide to the widest capacity her pelvis were to have under that pubic bone. So it's a great position if you've got a baby that's really not coming under that pubic bone well. And then you can see in this middle picture from the side, so you can kind of see more how that angle is. And you can see how they put a roll under the mom's back to provide some comfort. So it's not going to be a comfortable position, but you don't want it to be a painful position either. Sometimes there's reports that babies will have a physiologic decel during the position just because of the intensity for the mom. And then once the mom's out of the position, that recovers. So be aware of that if you use this position. And we're not doing it for super long. We're doing it for just a contraction or two, maybe three, and then we're moving. So in this middle picture, what they are actually doing is under the knees, they are pushing the legs straight up. So they're not lifting the legs or moving them this way. You don't want to change the angle of that pelvis, but she's just pushing the legs straight up into themselves to take some pressure off that hip socket. So when we were practicing this position at a course I did recently, we did do that. We pressed up on each other's legs, and it does make it less uncomfortable. So as long as you feel like you can do that without changing the angle of the hips, it can be very beneficial. Of course, some moms like it more than others, so you can always ask. And then this other position here on the right is flying cowgirl, and that position is a modified Walters. So you can see her legs are wide. Depending on where the baby is, you would use peanut balls in more positions in labor. But for Walters, you're trying to get the baby under the pubic bone. For flying cowgirl, trying to get the baby under that pubic bone. So you want this peanut ball about here. You can see her pelvis is kind of pushed forward, and really her back could even be arched a little more towards the top of that peanut ball. And again, it's a not comfortable position at all, but it's not painful. It's just uncomfortable. It's a lot of intensity, and usually 3 contractions, and you'll see significant change, and then moms can move to a different position. So these are some really great ideas for making room under that pubic bone. I really hope that you have found this information helpful, and that it has tangible information that you can go forward and use on a regular basis. If you are interested in becoming a doula and you would like to do it in a formal training setting, there are many, many doula organizations that you can use. Here is a slide. So all of these different ones, you should be getting a PDF that tells you what is the training format, how much is the cost. These are US dollars to my knowledge. Do they offer payment plans? Do you have to have renewal dues and things of that nature? So this is a very comprehensive list. I don't think if we missed any, we missed many. We tried to be very thorough in gathering this information for you. And I would say, in addition to looking at how they train and how much it costs to train, I would strongly, strongly encourage that you also read their philosophies, and if they give any restrictions to doulas, and if so, what those are, and make sure their values align with your values, because you don't want to certify with an organization that fundamentally you do not agree with. If you have questions, please feel free to send me emails. I'm happy to answer questions. I love talking about doulas. I love talking about the benefit of doulas, and I love talking about how doulas, doctors and midwives can all work together. Thank you so much for taking this time to let me talk to you.